Hey. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Elevative Shots. Three questions and an insightful conversation with great people. And I'm really honored to have Rob Hills today with me. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about him, and then we're gonna talk about a fun fact that is pretty interesting, and then we're gonna dive into the insightful conversation around mindfulness. I really love this topic because I think it's one of the main things as leaders that we should be nurturing and working on. Rob, how are you doing today? Before I introduce you.
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me, Mariana. It was nice you said you have great people to talk to. I was like, oh, thanks. I feel honored to be here. So thanks for having me.
Well, yeah, I mean, I want to bring great people, bringing great topics and conversations and experience to these shots every month. So
Mm.
let me tell you a bit about Rob. Rob is the host of the Balanced Leader podcast. So we are hoping that he will obviously do pretty well here because he's an experienced podcaster.
Yeah.
His show is dedicated to helping leaders build high performing teams while embracing sustainable and healthy ways of working. Through insightful conversations and practical strategies, Rob empowers leaders to lead with balance, purpose, and authenticity, creating a lasting impact in their workplaces and beyond. Rob has over 30 years of experience spanning the Royal Australian Air Force, the Australian Federal Police, and the ACT Public Service, as the Canberra Public Service. Rob brings a wealth of experience in leadership development, which that's one of the main topics of my elevative shots. He has delivered workshops worldwide of tens of thousands of professionals on leadership and intelligence, equipping them with the tools to navigate complex and demanding environments. As the author of Mindful Leadership Blueprint book, and I can see it at the back of your left.
There it is.
Yes, on
Yeah.
my left.
Yeah.
His work offers valuable insights and actionable strategies to drive meaningful change. Rob's passion lies in empowering individuals and organizations to unlock their full potential, and that could be through his writing, coaching, or interactive workshops. He's dedicated to helping leaders develop the skills, the mindset, and the resilience needed to thrive in today's ever evolving professional landscape. And that's the reason why I have Rob here today. There's a lot of things that we overlap in passions. And
Mm.
how good is that?
Mm.
A fun fact about Rob: when he left high school, his plan was to go to the university to become an accountant. But hear this, he joined the Air Force instead. I mean, what was, I mean, this is not part of the script, Rob, but what
Yeah.
happened there? What was the change of heart in between accounting and the Air Force?
Yeah. Well, when I was in high school, I really loved accounting. So I'm a very practical sort of person who loves numbers. So I thought, oh, accounting, I kind of enjoy this subject. So I thought when I finish high school, I'll go on to university and I'll do accountancy. But when I got to the end of high school, there was no gap year back then. So I was kind of like, I'm going into the workforce because I don't want to do another 4 years. If I'd had a gap year, I probably would have taken a gap year and then come back in. And so, yeah, I was doing some work at the time. I had a friend who was in the army and he said, you should join up. But I'm like, oh, no, the army's too hard. My dad was ex-Navy and he said, you should join. And I'm like, no, I get seasick. So the Air Force was the only really option left. So I forwent the opportunity to go to university and I joined the Air Force. And it was an amazing
The
decision. Really lucky that it worked out as well as it did. So it was
Very
great.
interesting. Love to hear more about that, but
Mm.
that have to be another episode, another conversation of Elevative
Exactly.
Shots. Well,
Yeah.
let's get, you is over 30 years of experience in different industries and different types of gigs. And I just wonder, I'm just really curious about your personal journey and your lessons learned. So your book is based on your own leadership experience with mindfulness.
Mm.
And First question for you is, what was the turning point that led to you to embrace mindful leadership? And what are the biggest lessons you have learned along the way?
Hmm. A great question. So, my leadership journey began when I enlisted in the Air Force when I was 18. So, I really got to learn leadership from the ground up. And it was like when you join the Air Force as an enlisted person, they really, and I say break you down, but it's not sort of as dramatic as that. But they really do sort of bring you together as a group and they teach you how to be a follower as well as a leader. It all happens all at once. So that was my first experience with leadership. With mindfulness, it became a couple of years later when I kind of noticed I had a tendency more towards being a little bit down. And I wouldn't describe it as like depression or anything sort of as serious as that, but just something wasn't right. So I'd heard about meditation and I thought, well, I'm going to give this a go. I didn't think about, reading a book or doing a course or anything. And I was in the Air Force in the 90s, late 90s, and it wasn't really an environment where you talked about mental health at that point. It's much better now. It's amazing now. But I just started to try this meditation thing and I failed miserably because I thought you had to sit there for 20 minutes and I thought you had to blank your mind and I couldn't do either. So I'm like, well, this is silly. I knew it was important. So I kept coming back to it. And the more I came back to it, the more I fail. And then I like get despondent. I'm not going to try this. Eventually I thought, Rob, read a book. Like you can do that without anyone else knowing. So I picked up a book and started to learn. I'm like, oh, I don't need to do this for 20 minutes and I don't need to blank my mind. It's not about that. It's about focusing my attention. And so as I practiced more and more, I became better at it. And eventually I could get to the point where I could sit there for 20 minutes and still not blank the mind because that's not the point.
Mm-hmm.
But I could focus my attention a lot better. So as I was doing this outside of work, I was noticing it was changing me inside of work. So again, if you think about the military, and again, I was working in a tri-service environment, it was not uncommon back then in the heat of the situation or in a training environment for people to yell or get quite heated. You wouldn't find that in the workplace now, of course, but that's just part of being in the military. It's part of the culture, I suppose, back then. And so I was sort of becoming more aware or more self-aware of my own impact on people, but also on when other people were getting, upset, the impact it was having on me. So I was really using mindfulness as a tool to sort of regulate myself and to see how things were going. And so I got really good examples of great leaders, and then I got the other end of the spectrum where they, perhaps weren't that leaders who weren't necessarily displaying the characteristics that I wanted to display. So I started to use mindfulness as a way of really checking in throughout the day, and then rather than emulating the people I didn't want to be, try and be more like the leaders that I thought that I respected. And I thought, well, they're a lot more calmer, they're a lot more measured. That's the sort of leadership that I want to practice. So it was an organic almost way of bringing the two together. And then over the years, I've just practiced it more and more. And then as I've joined different organizations, I've talked about my own journey, and people got really interested about it, which is why I wrote the book. I was in the AFP at the time, and I was talking about mindfulness for the first time some 15 years after I started, and I'm like very wary about it. But people were really open to it, and they would often grab me after and go, "Can you tell me a little bit more about this?" And because I practice in a really different way, so the way I practice is what I say: no fluff. There's no, singing bells or whatever. And not that there's anything wrong with any of these things, but it's just not my way of practicing. And I wanted a way for people who were practical like me, who were, probably at the time in the Defence Force or in the AFP, who didn't necessarily engage with the more spiritual practice of mindfulness, and they just wanted some tools to help them calm the mind a little bit more. And so, yeah, I eventually wrote the book, which was a long process, but a lot of fun at the same time, which was good.
Well, I have to get the book. I have to get the book. I was just going through your website, and it's really, really inspiring because it's something that, and that this belongs to the next question. But key things that you mentioned, I think the misconception around meditation and
Mm,
mindfulness is that I just have to go blank and not, don't think about anything, or that is really uncomfortable, right? And
mm,
because we are really used to going by the busyness or the inertia, right? So we don't have to take the time to stop. And as you said,
Yeah.
check in what's happening because emotions are there throughout the day. In the
Mm.
military might be a bit different to the workplace, but at the end of the day, same emotions, right?
Mm.
So
Yep.
I really liked the idea of, and this is what I advise people when, they practice yoga or the Pilates or meditation is I didn't find myself, it's not, I don't feel comfy. Well, trying. So you mentioned,
Mm.
trying and exploring. So you started with the 20 minutes meditation and then you went to a book and that's at the
Mm.
end of the day what works for you, right? So I
Yeah.
think trying and exploring is key.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
mhm,
Oh, sorry. Go.
yeah, and on the self-awareness. I just everything if you have the self-awareness, at least you have the clarity on what's going on and then you can take action.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for anyone starting, it is just about trying and it's being kind to yourself because
Mm,
anyone who starts meditation at the start is going to struggle a little bit.
yeah.
And they're often thinking that their experience is unique and that, oh, everyone else is just like I look around the room and everyone's just sitting there so peacefully. But people don't realize the churn is still happening inside. But they think it's just me. But it will happen. It will capture you and you will get sidetracked and you'll and I still do this. And I've been meditating for years and years and years. I meditate every morning when I wake up. And most mornings I'll get to the end of the time and I'll be like, oh, I was present for some of it, but then I was completely away with doing other things with my mind for the rest
Yep.
of it as well. So, yeah, it happens for sure.
It's the self-compassion piece, right?
Yeah.
And because you're taking your brain out of your comfort zone. Because if you
Mm,
do it for the first time, it's just really weird. Like anything else, like going to a gym or eating
mm,
something new, right? So I think it's about
yeah.
trying. And the second question I have for you is this misconception or people, especially in the workplace, now that we're
Mm,
talking about leadership, that to see mindfulness as a soft skill or something that's quite separate from the high performance in the workplace. So I'm
mm.
curious, Rob, what are the biggest misconceptions about that you have seen about mindfulness in leadership, and how can leaders overcome that resistance to adopt it?
Yeah, and another great question. And I think there's a lot of different misconceptions around mindfulness that are slowly starting to drop away now that mindfulness has become more mainstream, and we've been talking about it for quite a while now. One of the ones is that people associate it with religion. It isn't necessarily a religious practice. It is a part of, in fact, it's part of most religious practice. But you can have a standalone mindfulness practice that isn't particularly spiritual or religious in any way. So a lot of people are turned off by that fact if they don't necessarily follow a particular religion. So you don't have to have that. Another one is that you need sort of like talismans or props or anything like that. And that's a huge misconception for me because
Hmm.
I practice mindfulness throughout my day wherever I am. So if I'm sitting in the office, I might just go, you know what, I feel a little bit stressed. That was a big sort of thing that happened the last half an hour, whatever. I can just sit here and be present and be with my breath for a second and then jump back into my work. It doesn't take particularly a long time either, which is often a misconception. People are worried. And when I talk about meditation and mindfulness, I talk about them interchangeably, but they are two separate things. So, meditation, sitting down, often a dedicated practice, and it's often time based. Whereas mindfulness is something you weave in throughout the day, and you can practice it
Mm,
anywhere or at any time. And so again, you don't need any props or anything. You don't need anything to do it. You can do it sitting in the car while you're waiting for the lights. You're still watching the lights, ready to wait for the light to go green. But just in that moment, instead of, cursing traffic and wondering why, the person in front of you didn't take off quicker last time and how long is it going to take you to get to work and what's going to happen when you get there, just try and sit there and just breathe for a couple of seconds and just be present. A couple of other misconceptions. Mindfulness is a passing fad. Well, I think that one's almost, out of the culture by now. But it has been around for centuries. It'll be around for centuries. Yes, it got really popular there for a while. Everyone was talking about mindfulness. That's sort of dropped away a little bit now, I think. But we did go through a bit of a period where it was on everyone's lips, but it sort of dropped away a bit. But I think for me, when it comes to the leadership aspect, the biggest misconception I see from leaders is that it's going to cause me to lose my edge, that I need to be, feeling like I'm going 1,000 miles a minute all the time so I can perform at my best. So I can, be at the top of my game, so I can execute and be, really, really great
Yep.
at whatever it is that I do. And that is such a misconception. For me, leadership is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And the problem we're seeing in the workplace at the moment is burnout. And burnout
Mm-hmm.
happens when, well, there's a lot of different reasons why burnout happens, but one of the reasons is that people don't build in that self care throughout their day. And so they get to the end of the day and they're absolutely, it could be a 10, 12-hour day or whatever, and they just fall in a heap. And then they get up the next day and they do it again and they try and do it
Mm-hmm.
again. But if I'm using the analogy of driving a car, if you're constantly, revving the car up to the red line all the time, eventually the car's going to break. So you kind of need to pull back on the revs a little bit so that you can drive further and longer and, achieve all the goals that you want. Same thing with leadership. We see so many amazing leaders in the workplace who are very mindful, who are very, and think about it yourself when you look at two leaders in the workplace, one that's present, calm, in the moment versus someone who's running around like a headless chook. I know who I want to be working for,
Yep.
and they are still achieving what they're setting out to achieve. They're just achieving it in a different way. So, yeah, that's one of the biggest misconceptions that hopefully, and that's a part of my mission is to try and to get people to stop thinking in that way.
Yeah, I think it's we talking about again the busyness and the what society, the standards of the society that, if you are overproductive, it's that's this the way. I think I was just talking to a good friend in the public service, and he was mentioning this need of immediate results. And if we
Mm,
don't get the immediate results, we keep trying. We're trying to feel
mm,
what's missing instead
yeah.
of, and look, I'm telling you this out loud, and that's probably Mariana in certain times, right? When the anxiety,
Me
anxiety
too.
kicks
Me
in,
too.
I'm
Yeah.
like, I cannot stop. I need to keep
Mm,
keep going and producing until there's a point of my body whispering something's going on. And are you
mm,
going to do something? Are you going to stop? Are you going to check in? Are you going to self-regulate yourself? I do yoga, like practice yoga,
mm. Yep.
but the tendency of my, throughout the day is that, I better not go to yoga today because I prefer to finish this for the client.
Yeah.
So the goal of this year is not, that's the priority. That's what is
Mm,
should be top in my on my list because if I'm not
yep.
well, I cannot be the best leader for my clients, right? And that's sort
Absolutely.
of the principle. But yeah, it's just the marathon, the burned out, I think is one of my biggest concerns with leadership.
Mm,
And so if we talked about that and the future of leadership, what
mm,
is it that what are you looking 2025, 2026, the next 5 years? Because you talk
mm,
about the needs for leaders who inspire and drive sustainable is key here, success.
mm.
What
Yep.
shifts do you think organizations need to make to embrace a more self-aware and holistic leadership culture?
Yeah, and I think I really want to pick up on something you just said there around burnout. I think, and this is leading into the answer to this question, most people think burnout will never happen to me.
Mm,
And in most cases, no one ever thought, I'm going to push myself so hard that I'm going to get burnout. We start, especially when we're
it's
younger,
true.
we can do anything. Like we're bulletproof. We're at it. We're doing operating 110% all the time, and that's amazing. But it isn't sustainable, and it doesn't last long term. So I think it's important for leaders to really realize that we are all susceptible. And you may have gotten close to burnout before. You may have never experienced it before. But at some point, if you keep pushing all the time and don't build in some self-care in there, it's going to get you. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
a question of if, it's a question of when. So I think the old way of thinking around well-being in the workplace is that you could have one or the other. You could have high performance or you could have well-being, but you can't have both. You can have someone who's, hitting their mark, hitting their KPIs all the time, or you can have someone who's sitting on a mountain, meditating for 12 hours a day. Those two things don't come together. But actually, in my mind, they're a part of the same equation. They're the same side of the same coin. So if we look at high performance to be at our best, and if we compare this to athletes, for example,
Mm,
athletes aren't constantly performing at the peak. They aren't constantly go, 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 go. They perform for a period of time and then they stop and they replenish their energy. They get massages. They go through film on the tapes to go through what actually happened in the moment. So what we'd call reflective practice in the corporate environment, and they would train and they would not operate at 100%. They'd operate at 60%.
hmm
And they would do that for a period of time, and then they would build up, and then they would go again. So we have to get out of this. Again, it's the analogy of it's a marathon, not a sprint. We can't be operating at the red line all the time. So for me, when I talk to leaders about and I started doing this when I was in the AFP, and it's something that I continue now in the work that I do when I run leadership workshops. It's about putting well-being back into leadership programs. It's
hmm
not having a well-being course and a leadership course. It's they're both. They are both. They're in the same course. Um, and so I think we really need to get to the point where we can find that balance and whatever that balance is for us. Now, when I named the Balance Leader podcast, I realized that was going to be a little bit controversial because people are like, oh, there's no such thing as balance. But when you're trying to achieve balance, you're always in a state of, yeah, okay, work's taking priority this week and the family's taking a bit of a back seat. Next week, I know that I have to lift that up again because otherwise I am going to topple over. So I want to try and maintain that point where I can manage both things well, but I know that sometimes they're going to go up and sometimes they're going to go down. So I think for leaders, I think it's really important that you look at your own well-being practices and that you really practice what you preach. So I don't think it's okay for a leader to say, okay, everyone, well-being's a priority. I want you all to go home at 5 o'clock, but then they're sending emails up until 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. It doesn't send the right message. So
hmm
I think they need to really show to the people around them, you know what, I'm taking a walk at lunch. And I think that's okay. And as you mentioned before, and in some environments, public services is my experience. Um, we don't build in well-being practices and people don't necessarily think it's okay or they're worried to talk about it. Oh, I'm going for a walk at lunch. I won't tell anyone.
hmm
Or, I'm knocking off early to go to a yoga class. Amazing. Invite some friends with you. Tell everyone what you're going to do. Create a space where it's okay for people to do that. Um, so I think going forward, what leaders really need to be focusing on is incorporating and embedding their own well-being practice and then creating a space where other people can have their well-being practice, whatever that looks like for them, but
hmm
making sure that everybody has a space to do that and then talking about it and talking about how everyone's going, checking in with people, making sure everyone's going okay. It's not just about, again, hitting the mark or hitting the KPIs or achieving the task. It's about how do we do this in a sustainable way that we can all get to the finish line with. And probably the final thing I'll say on this is, and I gave the example before, just start breathing at work. Like you get to the end of the day and you're like, I'm carrying so much stress. I can feel it in my shoulders. I can feel it I'm like all wrapped up. Just a couple of times a day. This is a great starting point. Just take a couple of breaths. It can be 60 seconds. You don't have to tell anyone you're doing it. But if you do, great. Get everyone else
Yep.
to do it with you. But you're going to reduce your own stress, your own cortisol, all the different things that are happening in your body. And it's going to make you a less reactive leader. It's going to make you be more present in the moment. You're going to have to apologize less for snapping at people or making mistakes because you're going to be more measured in the moment in what you're doing. So it's as simple as just taking a couple of breaths, throughout the day.
Yeah. No, I love it. For me, particularly the practice of meditation
Mm,
itself has been, ups and downs. I stick
mm,
to it for 60 days and then I derail. And I say that because I think that as we mentioned at the beginning, it's just trying, right? And I
mm.
think there is for me three key words: consistency,
Yep.
and consistency in the whole practice. So you were mentioning to create a space where everyone feel safe to practice, mindfulness in the way that works for them. Consistency in how you role model that. Intention. We need to be intentional in pretty much everything we do, but in mindfulness, we really need to have the intention of I'm gonna meditate for 60 seconds, for one day, if sorry, for 1 hour, for 1 minute, whatever works for you,
Mm.
but intention and frequency. I think frequency is what, you will see the progress. You might not see it the first day, the second day, but it happens, right?
Yeah.
So with this practice of meditation, I was using an app for my menstrual cycle. So
Mm.
interesting, especially for women and women that are,
Mm.
listening to this, is how important is to integrate meditation and
Mm.
the practice of mindfulness. 3 minutes is the meditations, and they adapt meditation to where you are in your cycle.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
important to
Yeah.
regulate your hormones and to
Yeah.
be self-aware of what's going on in your body when,
Yeah.
there's different four different phases there.
Mm.
So life changing. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just in the morning. I do it 3 minutes. It's all good. And I have this awareness of what's going on the day. So pretty similar to
Yeah.
what you're mentioning.
Yeah, and absolutely, and a great point there to adapt it to your situation. I think people are so
Mm-hmm.
worried I've got to do it this way because Instagram tells me I've got to do it this way, or the book tells me I've got to do it this way. I'm here to tell you the only way I got successful with meditation was that I stopped listening to, what I thought was the right way and just listened to my body and just said, you know what, I'm going to start really small. And exactly as you said, it was intention and it was frequency and it was consistency. So every day, same time, because that's easiest for me. I meditate in the morning. I meditate in bed. A lot of books will tell you not to meditate in bed. I don't fall asleep though, so it's okay. Well, every now and again, but it's fine. It works for
Yep.
me. So find the situation that works for you, adapt it to it, and just stick to it. And again, be kind to yourself. You're gonna struggle with it a bit. It happens, and that's completely normal. And part of the mindfulness practice is to go, I'm struggling with this today. That's interesting. Why is that? Why is that a problem
Mm.
today?
Mm-hmm.
And just being with that and going, well, that's okay. It's trying to release the judgment. So it's not judging yourself for whether you think you're hitting the mark or not. So again, be kind.
Yeah, no, I love the judgment, the judgmental piece, the fear, especially in the
Mm,
workplace. It's and that's why, when we create psychological safe places,
yeah,
we normalize this rather than feeling afraid of saying, I'm gonna go for a walk,
yeah,
or, at 12, I'm gonna switch off and I'm gonna go to my yoga class and then I will come back. It's all good.
yeah,
I can
yeah,
assure you, you will probably be, 100% much better and
yeah,
productive
yeah.
when you take the time for you.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I have been guilty of being worried about what other people think of me having a practice, like a meditation practice at work. I used to meditate with my hands above the keys, picking a spot on the screen and just sitting there and sort of softening my gaze and just focusing on that spot. I wouldn't tell anyone I was doing it because I actually, tried to hide it. But eventually I'm like, stuff that. And people didn't care. They're like, oh, you're
It's
meditating again. That's great. I want to
it's
do that. Yeah.
it's self-judgment at the end of the day,
Yeah.
many, many times. We anticipate. We like anticipating things, and that's the beauty of meditation. Just to end this, I was just practicing yoga in one retreat like 3 years ago, and the teacher, she's like, we suffer because we live or either in the past and we ruminate, or
Yeah.
we live in the future, anticipating the worst. Meditation, mindfulness bring you to the present, to this
Exactly.
exact moment, and then you don't suffer. I mean,
Yep.
easy said than done. I don't want to say that,
Yeah.
but it's just again consistency, intention, and frequency in this
Yeah.
practice.
Absolutely. Yep. Such good points.
Well, I think we can be speaking forever, Rob, but
Yes.
I intentionally created this to be, if you want to know more, if you are watching this and you want to know more, please go and get the book. Rob, they can get it on their website, I believe.
Yeah, look, you can get it from my website, which is www.robhills.com.au, or you can purchase on Amazon or one of the stores like that.
There you go. And follow Rob on LinkedIn and his podcast. Are you ready? You ready in that podcast journey this year drop or not yet?
Yes,
Yeah,
I intentionally, there we go again. I intentionally took a break over Christmas,
good.
and I that was my last podcast for 2024. I said I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to be okay with it. So I've recorded the podcast. It's going to drop on Monday, Monday on when we're having this conversation. So yeah, it'll be back up and running soon for sure.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to the next one. And for everyone interested, you know where to find Rob, LinkedIn, website, and happy to read your comments, feedback, whatever you want to tell us on this YouTube channel or when I post it on LinkedIn. You know, feedback is super important to keep improving and growing. Anything you want to add before we go, Rob?
No, just thank you for having me. I love talking about this, and as you said, we could talk about this all day. So, conscious of the time, had to sort of distill it as much as we can. But if anyone does have any questions or wants to know more, please let me know.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And get ready for the next one because it's already lined up and it's going to be about communications, the world of strategic communications in the workplace. So, can't wait to have that one too. Thank you, Rob, for your time today, for these fantastic insights. And I'll see you, everyone, in the next episode. You have a good one. Thank you. Bye bye.